Young ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. Once again, you are welcome here on the Evade Disconsciences platform. This is the top story in international news. All eyes are on France today, the 11th of July, 2025, as the country has made an admission of failure, an admission of powerlessness in the face of the Great Federation of Russia. And as truly surprising as it may indeed seem, yes, it was the esteemed French Minister of the Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu, who recently made a significant series of public statements. In these statements, he made it clear to anyone willing to listen that Russia is a power before which France can do nothing. France can do nothing in the face of this power. Yes. In fact, he says that Russia has made France one of its top targets. That's precisely how he truly begins, before openly expressing his profound fears and, quite unintentionally, inadvertently praising the formidable strength of the Russian army, indeed, the very inherent strength of Russia itself in its entirety. It's a very rare kind of statement. It's a statement that makes it clear that, obviously, France is backed into a corner. When you are backed into a corner, you have to tell certain truths, even if you didn't want to say them. He says that Russia has made France one of its top targets. Yet, Russia isn't doing anything to France at the moment. Nothing. So far, we really haven't seen Russia do anything to France. It's actually Germany and the United Kingdom that are much more targeted. But what makes him say that? So that's what we're going to talk about in this video conference, which I humbly ask you to share as much as possible. You need to share the video conference in every group you can. Give it lots of likes. Don't forget to share this video conference. Share it as much as you can, as long as you can. There you go. Let's dive deeper. I said the French Minister of the Armed Forces is actually, let me correct myself. That was a mistake. Is actually the Chief of Staff of the French Armed Forces. We'll see his name in a moment. He says that Francais says Moscow has made France its main adversary. Yes. Yeah, is his statement. The Chief of Staff of the French Armed Forces, General Thierry Boucard, stated that Russia poses a lasting threat to France. A lasting threat. Meaning Russia is not just a threat, but a lasting threat. As long as we continue to live and breathe, Russia remains a significant and enduring threat to the nation of France. What's the reason for this? According to him, it's because Russia has made France one of its top adversaries. But what has France done to Russia? For Russia to target France as a potential adversary, it was Emmanuel Macron who provoked Russia. When France starts making insulting remarks against Russia, when France speaks carelessly or recklessly by sending military contingents, when France decides to create a coalition of volunteers, when France says that soldiers should be sent on the ground in Ukraine, France doesn't realize that it is provoking Russia. You make a request to Russia. You say to Russia, I want us to be sworn enemies. Russia accepts. Russia designates you as its enemy, even though Russia hasn't yet officially put France on the list of enemy countries, if I remember correctly. But already, they are trembling at home. They're panicking. Let's go. What does he say? The Chief of Staff of the French Armed Forces, let me clarify again. It's not the French Minister of the Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu. It's actually the Chief of Staff. He says this: Russia is involved, or at least Russia is a party to all the threats I just described to you. That is to say, he described a number of threats. And he says that Russia is involved in all of these threats. In other words, for all the threats any country can imagine, Russia is involved. Especially when it comes to plans, Russia is involved. He says Russia, in this respect, represents a lasting and nearby threat, which for me is the most significant. In other words, among all the threats, all the countries in the world that are supposed to threaten France, Russia is the most significant. That is, the chief of staff chose to use a rather unusual French expression. Dimensionality refers to the idea of dimension. He means that the scale of the threat posed by Russia to France is so great. He says, there are many other threats. Russia is a threat that is both lasting and also very close. That means the Russian threat is very close to them. But also and above all, for him, the chief of the defense staff, Russia is the most dimensionality threat, meaning the greatest, in other words, beyond just great, it's the utmost. But here's where he ruins everything. Pay close attention, share this video. He says this. He explains why he says that Russia is a dimensionality threat. He first says, Russia is a true conventional and nuclear military power. Russia is a true nuclear power, both conventional and nuclear. That is to say, when we refer to international conventions, in terms of arms production and all that, Russia possesses the weapons that make it a power, but in accordance with the law, with the conventions. So that's why he says that Russia, he says, first of all, this is just the beginning, He says, first, Russia is a true conventional military power, but also a nuclear one. He doesn't stop there. He goes on and says, and that's something that is fully acknowledged. In fact, Russia is built on its system of strength. Russia is built on its system of strength. That's what we've always said here. He says, and even today, Russia is still putting in enormous effort. So Russia was built on a system of strength. And today, Russia is still putting in a tremendous amount of effort to continue being strong. He says, and Russia is still putting in enormous, colossal efforts today, efforts that are hard for us to even imagine. He himself says that Russia is still putting in enormous, colossal efforts that are hard to imagine. Even they don't understand. So, this is the statement made by the highest ranking officer in France during a press conference in Paris. It's frightening. They're afraid of Russia. At least, there are some who dare to tell the truth. Maybe after his statement, they'll fire him. Who knows? They might remove him from his position. But what's clear is that he couldn't keep that to himself. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the top story of the news. Thank you for sharing it as much as possible. I'll be back with more information shortly. This was the voice of your one and only Samurai.